Hello and welcome back to another true video. Today I'm doing a 25.14 support tier list. So if you enjoy content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There weren't many changes towards the support world this patch. In fact, there were only 3 nerfs, 2 of them actually being direct support nerfs, and 1 of them being a nerf to Zoe, which actually impacts more support Zoe than mid Zoe. The other change was a adjustment to Guardian. They wanted to increase the base shield whilst nerfing down the bonus health ratio, buffing up the AP ratio, making it more of an option on some of the Enchanter style champions. It's ended up treading relatively neutral, and I don't believe any of the enchanters have really actually optimized into it, so not a huge adjustment there. And yeah, let's get into it. So the D tier is going to consist of the same champions, but the tier list is relatively similar to the previous one. The likes of Twitch, albeit has seen a shift over from Halo Blades to PTA, still just doesn't perform that well in support, is a pick I would recommend completely avoiding. Outside of OTPs, it doesn't really see play, so you're probably safe in regards to this one. Misfortune just doesn't have good enough AP ratios to really support her in the support role, so another pick which I just recommend avoiding completely. Malphite's pretty gimmicky, does have the trading pattern with the spam of Q and the go in button of the ultimate. Outside of Yasuo pairings, doesn't really see play, kind of, and just doesn't really provide enough compared to what some of the other support options have, and relies very heavily on just snowballing. Veigar sits within the D tier. Him and Ziggs used to be more popular a long time ago, but they've had their kits pretty heavily adjusted to not be as good within the duo role, or just have power siphoned out of their kits. On top of this, I believe that just items generally aren't as forgiving for non-traditional support options outside of some of the mage options at the moment. Veigar currently sits as just not really that great of an option outside of your Ziggs pairing where you just bop them into the cage. You're not really going to see him here. Ashe sits within the D tier. She's one of the ones which I'd say is slightly better than the other D tier options. The other are low D tiers, picks I would recommend completely avoiding. Ashe, I think if you play it incredibly well, can have value as this very aggressive lane stomping champion. I don't think it's good by any means, and it's very, very predicated on being advantageous and being very, very well piloted, which is why I just don't really recommend it as an option, albeit there are some angles. I've removed Set from the D tier, and I've removed Gragas from the C tier, as these picks just aren't really being played anymore. I believe both of them had spikes during certain periods of or Set when the Overlord's Blood Mail got buffed, and in Gragas' case, it saw a bit of competitive play as an answer to your Alistar, for example. That spiked him in solo queue a bit, but it has once again gone back down. So let's move on to the C tier events. We lead off with Amumu, who is okay. So Amumu's an interesting one because he's just very easy to pilot. That's the rewarding point of Amumu, the fact that he's easy to pilot and has a lot of CC with his kit. Outside of MF pairings, you're just not really going to be playing Amumu though. Right now his kit is still good, but he's not quite as good as he has been in the past. His items are also just not that great for support at the moment. I say it every patch, missing an item like Even Shroud is just detrimental to him, and it just makes him not a support option, which I'd really recommend. Renata sits within the C tier. She's begun kind of moving away from just the Kalista pairing. Obviously, Kalista's in a terrible spot in solo queue at the moment and very, very unpopular. Renata is also very, very unpopular, but I think in the right spot she can get value. But I'd usually just recommend other options over her, which are either easier to pilot or have more spots they can be played in, because I do think she requires pretty specific spots to get value out of the champion. Mel, if maxed correctly, could probably be bumped up to behind the C tier, maybe even B tier option. Mel, when not E-maxing, is just a considerably weaker champion, which is why I do have her in the C tier at the moment. Silas is in the C tier, purely on the basis that he's not that great as a support option anymore, and the fact that he's very, very dependent on being a counter pick. You have to get good ultimates out of this champion, otherwise he is just not a good support option to opt into. It's the spots where I recommend playing Silas, or maybe not recommend, but where Silas is good, enemy team has Malphite, and enemy bot lane has a good ultimate which you can get access to, something like a Varasol, something like a Leona ultimate, where you just get this instant power through it. Outside of that, though, you shouldn't be playing him. He got pretty aggressively nerfed with the kind of push towards Bruiser Silas in the support role, because you need to opt into those AP. You want to opt into those AP burst items, and he's lost burst within his kit. It still works. You can still do it. There are Storm Surge variants of Silas out there. it's just not as consistent as before, which is why he is kind of like as a C tier option at the moment. And then Yumi, I'm dropping Yumi down to the C tier. She got nerfed again this patch. This is the third nerf Yumi has had in 6 patches. 2 of them have been to her ultimate, and I believe one of them was to her shield and passive. And yeah, she's kind of gone back to being this pick I just once again not really recommend playing. She's already pretty heavily gated by certain pairings. Like, you have to be paired with like one of these champions, which really benefit from like the on-hit kind of power this pick provides. Some of the more hidden ones were like your Tristans and your Lucians. The obvious ones were like your Zeris and some of your hyper carries. Right now, though, I just recommend other enchanter options over Yumi. She's been nerfed pretty aggressively, and that's just kind of left her in a pretty bad spot. I believe her best friend AP ratio, especially on the ultimate, has gone down by like 30%, which is very, very aggressive. It was a 33% nerf, though, on the baseline, so from 15% down to 10%. So if it was like 90% to, it would go down to 60%, which is very, very aggressive. Pick I just recommend avoiding now. Moving on to the B tier then, I lead off with Tahm Kench. She's been in a pretty bad spot for a while now, ever since the whole top lane Tahm Kench like incident where Riot were like, nope, we're not going to let this happen. He's been in a bad spot just across the board. I don't really recommend the pick, but if you are comfortable playing him, you know the spots where he works because you can get like good value out of his ultimate, or you can make use of like the Heartsteel like power on this champion, then he can work. But a pick at the moment I just recommend avoiding. Senna as a champion has been pretty neglected in support as of recent. Both the kind of like AD builds and the support builds aren't doing as well at the moment, albeit if you pick them in the right spots, there's definitely more potential with this champion. Senna as a whole is very much punished when you blind her because she suffers into like your hook champions. She's a very, very squishy target, and if you ever get onto her, she'll just explode. But yeah, if you play something like, if you play her into as like a counter pick into some of the matchups which can't really consistently punish you, then you can definitely get value out of a champion. Right now, though, in support, I'd recommend just avoiding her. ADC Senna is where you should play her if you are comfortable on her. Nidalee, I have in the B tier. Someone mentioned in the previous video that I underrate Nidalee. I don't think I so much underrate Nidalee. I think she's just a very, very hard champion to pilot. The value through the steroid on the E is very, very potent. Don't get me wrong, like, it is a very, very powerful ability, one of the most powerful abilities, honestly, any basic kit has. It's crazy. 7 seconds of, like, 80% attack speed, combined with, like, a missing percent health heal. The champion, though, needs to be more than that. Like, you can't just play Nidalee being a heal bot. You are not going to get enough value out of the champion, albeit being a very strong ability. You have to pilot the pick well. You have to be able to kind of use your early lane power combined with like your spears later on to the game, making sure you're getting traps down, using like vision effectively. There is more to this champion than just its heal, albeit once again the heal is a very powerful part of her kit, which is why I rate her towards the low end of the B tier. But if you play her well, she is an incredibly good solo queue support option at the moment. Could honestly be competitive with some of the S2 options, especially when you go like maybe towards those high-end elite brackets. That is where the champion really does shine quite well, and like you pair her with the right things, that is once again also quite an important thing, because you are foregoing an engaged support, which is pretty important in the current kind of like team fight objective fighting meta. So you are going to be missing that when you opt into a champion like this, which is why you do have to get like more value out of the pick than just the heal. Teemo sits in the B tier. I think he's not a troll pick when you play him support. I mean, that's obviously if your intention is not to troll with the champion. He has good baseline kit. The blind combined with the pretty abusive laning phase, and if you like weave around the bushes, I think it's definitely pretty strong in the right spots. And the scaling with the shrooms combined with like the ability to play around objectives are pretty nice. Like, I think Teemo is actually a pretty solid option here. Once again, it's the similar issue when playing some of these non-traditional supports or these like picks which don't provide like anything outside of like damage or very limited CC. Obviously in Teemo's case is Q-blind and like the control he has with the shrooms. You have to get a lot of value out of the kit, and yeah, I think you are going to be missing that, so I don't rate him quite as high as some of the other options at the moment. Annie sits in the B tier. Obviously, she's had changes to kind of like push her, maybe not so much away from support, but generally just like away from Tibbers' power, which is nice in certain regards because your baseline kit is better. But right now, Shralia's is just not that amazing of an item, and that was kind of the reason why Annie was so strong in the past. But Shralia's was just so overstated and gave so much of a boost that she could kind of work here. Right now, though, I'd recommend not playing her. I just don't think she's quite as good as some of the other options. But in the right spots, I do think this kit can have value. Good upfront burst damage combined with the shield, which is a very powerful ability played in support. I think it can work, and that was also one of the other things in the past why Annie was so good, because the E shield was just so much stronger. Like, I'm pretty sure you just E max when playing support Annie, which is where some of that power came from. Swain sits in the beta. I hate to say it, but I don't think Swain's actually that bad in support at the moment. Like, I'm a bit of a Swain support hater because I think he's just so good in his other roles when you can get him in the right spots. But Swain support, if you are comfortable on him and you once again use him effectively as a counter pick, I think it's pretty good. So I do have him as more like a mid to high end beta option. Maybe like him and Morgana sit kind of near each other, where I don't think they're quite as bad as they have been in the past, but they're still picks which I think if you play them in other spots, or like not so much other spots, but like in other roles, you can usually get more value out of them. But yeah, Swain, I think he's more of a mid to high end beta option these days, so I'm going to have him as a mid to high end beta option. Brand, I don't like so much anymore. I mean, I haven't liked for a while. Like, the general just nerfs towards Brand combined with the Liandry nerf recently and then buffs towards other mages have just left him in a pretty undesirable spot. Brand should be one of the best champions for this elo bracket, and he isn't. So I don't really recommend him at the moment because he doesn't scale particularly well into higher elo brackets. He's very, very greedy in the way he wants to play, and honestly, I'd probably just put him towards the low end of the B tier. I'm not a fan of the champion at the moment. Galio suffers from not having great itemization. It's akin to some of the other bot lane options where you have to go look at on these champions, and they're rather have something like, your even shrouds or as of the past. It's always going to be the best item to kind of like emphasize where these champions were once good. Isaac also has the same issue where he struggles with the itemization in the bot lane at the moment. Albeit his baseline kit's pretty good, so you can kind of work around it. Pyke is an incredibly good support if piloted well. If you pilot him badly, he is a must avoid. He is the hardest, or one of the hardest supports at the moment. I mean, like, same tiers like your Nidleys, your Elises, your Bards, for example, where if you pilot them incredibly well, they are some of the best options in the game. I think Bard has very clearly come out as being a very good competitive option, but if you can play him in solo queue, he is probably one of the best solo queue options to go to at the moment. He's challenging to play though, so I don't have him in the S tier, I'm in the A tier. But like baseline, I still think he's incredibly good. So yeah, that's kind of, I mean, I'll talk more about him when I get to him, but that's kind of the gist with some of these elite skewed champions at the moment. Seraphine has kind of fallen on the back burner as of recent. I still think in the right spots, and like paired alongside an Ashe, she can be quite good, but it isn't quite as good as she has been in the past. She's once again kind of gone back to being that jack of all trades, not really excelling at anything, but pretty good when paired with the right things. Or like, and into certain like compositions. Hui I have in the beta, just a bit more agency when playing this champion compared to some of the other options. Obviously your supportive aspect is your shield. It's not a huge one, but it's fair if you like if you like that shielding aspect of the champion. Generally, you're just playing around his poke and his pretty obnoxious kind of like wave clear where you can just shove and like trade people under tower. And if you're comfortable playing the champion, you can get value out of him. If you're not, he probably sits as like a low B tier option at the moment. Blitzcrank sits within the B tier. I mean, it's weird because Blitzcrank once upon a time was actually quite a good mid to low elo option, but Riot have gone, no, we don't want that anymore. We want Blitz to just be a below the bar champion because he is a frustrating option to play against. To an extent, makes sense. It just makes him less recommendable as an option. I think you have to be good at piloting the pick. You understand why you're hooking a target or what compositions you're hooking like into, and that is where you get the value out of the champion. If you don't know why you're playing this champion, then you're probably playing him in the bad spot or without kind of the knowledge of why the pick needs to be played or is being played in the first place. So, but pick him in the right spots, picking compositions which are very punishing to play against a Blitzcrank. Things like Senna and very squishy, isolated targets with a lack of mobility is where this champion can be very rewarding. Yumi, I obviously spoke about, has dropped down. Morgana sits in the B tier. I don't like this champion, but she has been buffed more recently, and it's definitely gave her some legitimate power. I still think her kit is very mismatched for a support, and she probably needs an kit update. I can't remember which one is VGU gameplay. Yeah, I think it's like that's a visual gameplay update. just a gameplay update, a mini rework, whatever the specification is. She needs some level of adjustment to kind of like find herself as like a better support without maybe being quite as frustrating. So maybe they take some power out of the queue. But right now, yeah, I have her as like a mid to high end B2 option. She's not quite as bad as she has been in the past. I think there's more legitimacy when playing this champion. Lux, I think if you can snowball very effectively, can be quite a good support option. I prefer her in other roles at the moment. I think both bot lane Lux, if you played well, and mid lane Lux is actually really sleeper good at the moment. So definitely probably the weakest of her three roles, but I think in the right spots and snowballing quite aggressively can be a pretty good option. Xerath suffered a bit when Horizon Focus got adjusted, and I still think he can compete with the A tier options, and like once again, a lot of the B tier options can compete with the S tier options. He's just not quite as good at the moment, so I just have him slightly below the bar. I recommend things like Vel'Koz over him, for example. Fiddlesticks, it got nerfed. Lost a decent chunk of power, lost a pretty sizable amount of his player base. I still think he can be quite good if you're like aware of the power of his ultimate, or you're utilizing the like effigy kind of nature of this champion effectively, because that is where the power of support Fiddlesticks comes in, like the CC, the ultimate, and the effigies. I mean, that's just Fiddlesticks' power in general. But if you can, make use of that, I think he can still be a very good option. He's just not quite the go and play this champion because he's just broken too anymore. He's fine if you can play him well. Shen, I don't like quite as much anymore. He was originally he was for counterpick to Leona, and then he got overbuffed, and he became like an A tier option, like a high A tier option even. He got nerfed, he lost a pretty genuine amount of power, and I don't really recommend him quite as much anymore. He's once again gone back to play him as a counter pick into some of these like engage options. You can get more value than just like blinding the champion, but at that point, you're probably better off playing like Braum, for example, who is still very good even with the nerfs. This patch might be debatable going into next patch. He's once again taking another. Next patch is an even heavier swing at Braum, so definitely something which I'll talk about then. But Shen, not quite as recommendable anymore. I think some of his spots are kind of superseded by other options in the current meta. Zoe, I'm dropping down. The nerf was towards her early game and support, early game, towards her like base power, baseline kit. Her W's are slightly weaker spell early, her Q's are slightly weaker spell early, and that's meaningful for support Zoe, so she is going to be dropped down from the A to the B tier. I still think if you're very comfortable playing this champion and you know how to snowball effectively, she can be a very good option, just not quite as good as she was in the previous patch. Moving on to the A tier then, we lead off with Pantheon, who I still like as an AD, as kind of like damage option for support role. He's pretty unique in that class. Like, he is the easy option if you are looking at Pyke Pantheon. They are pretty like standout AD options though. Like, there just isn't a huge amount of like variety which you can go to. So yeah, I recommend him as an A tier option at the moment. If there was more within the pool, he might be. He would probably drop down to the B tier, but because he has a pretty large field of where you can play him because he doesn't have competition, it makes him better as an option. He's being nerfed next patch for jungle. Shouldn't really matter a huge amount of support, but is just something to note. Rakan, with the Guardian changes, stayed pretty neutral. I believe he lost 0.3 win rate over the patch, but that's pretty negligible. That can just be a result of like many things. So yeah, I'm going to drop him. I'm not dropping him. I'm leaving him as an A tier option. I still think he's really good if piloted really well. Benefits from like Uzziah pairings and some of these like team fighting kind of high mobility picks, like your Vaynes, your Twitches, for example, can work really nicely with the Rakan. But I still think he's a rewarding A tier option. Karma, the 3 points Q into Emax Moonstone variant is really good. The AP build isn't quite as good. Like, that puts her as more like a low B tier option with like the QMax Malignance. But if you are playing the Enchanter build, I think she's a solid mid to high end A tier option. Like, she's really good in that regard. Fresh, kind of slept on, kind of not. This pick, it's weird, because I don't like seeing Fresh in my game. Like, if I have a Fresh, I'm like, because this pick is really hard to play. But a good Fresh will make this champion look incredibly strong. There's a definite, split at the moment where I think Fresh, if you pilot him really well, and you know the games where he's really good, you play him with your hyper carries, can be a really good champion. If you just blind him, you're playing him for the love of the game, this pick definitely suffers from that. I don't recommend playing him unless you're really comfortable on him. And if you're comfortable, I think he's a pretty good option at the moment. He is definitely slept on, as I kind of led off with. But it's like Sona, where you don't usually want to see this champion, but when you get a good one, it is noticeable the power in this champion. LeBlanc and Elise, well, actually I have them slightly separated, but I'll put them next to each other. I think both these are really, really good AP snowball options. They're both still very strong as support picks at the moment. I recommend playing them if you haven't already. Support, to an extent, removes some of the difficulty of the champion because you are more now just executing your combo correctly rather than either having to CS in LeBlanc's case or kind of like think about like how to play the jungle for Elise. So it, to an extent, yeah, makes these champions easier, which is better for support because support is obviously when you get a bit more agency, it can be really, really impactful. So definitely something to note when playing these champions. Shaco, and Zyra and Vel'Koz are like other AP options you can lean into. These like 5 give you a bit more agency of the game. It gives you a bit more damage, which you can opt into. I think Zyra pairs really nicely with some of the like setup champions. Like, not, you don't want to pair with like a hyper carry, but something like a Jhin, for example, or like an Ashe, where you can shove in waves, you can poke under tower. I think she can be a really effective option. In Shaco's case, his traps are really, really powerful, and against compositions which have a hard time like dealing with them, that's where he really shines. I think Vel'Koz is a pretty good artillery option. Once again, pairs nicely with like your Jins and your Ashes, for example, where you can like poke them out under tower and kind of use your obnoxious wave clear to really like kind of drill that home. Zilean sits within the A tier. I like him in the right compositions. I don't think you can blind him and expect to get like insane value out of a champion, but into compositions which are reliant on fast takedowns, or into compositions which are punished by the movement speed cripple, or if you're playing him alongside team compositions which really benefit from the movement speed, this champion can be really, really oppressive. So I think there's a lot of spots where you can play him, but you want to pick him in those spots, because if you don't, then he becomes outvalued by other support options. Since it's a good A2 option, it's challenging to an extent to play. Like, he's pretty unique, so you do have to have had some level of games on him. But yeah, it's about picking him in the right spot more than anything. Maokai, I should probably drop a bit lower. The rewarding part about Maokai is the fact that he is very, very trivial to play. He's an easy champion to kind of just pick up when you need him, gives you some level of front line, gives you a champion which can kind of roam around the map, provide like good tower dives, set up vision with his E. He's a bit of everything, and that's quite nice when he's pretty simplistic to play. But if you are looking for something which can maybe snowball and be played a bit more consistently into higher ranks, he's probably not the option for you. But he is there as a pick, and he sits as an A2 option because he's easy to play more than anything. Soraka, Milio, I believe these are my 2 like enchanter options in the A2 at the moment. I think Milio paired alongside things which really benefit from his W and his like the passive burn can be really effective. Soraka, in the case of like pairings, really likes an Ashe, but compared more generalistically with a lot of the pool, like I think Milio and Soraka are pretty broad champions in kind of what they can be played into these days. Poppy is counter pick reliant, same goes for Tarek. Well, I mean, unless you're really good at Tarek, like my support is like a challenger Tarek player, like which is really funny because he can make it work into most things. It can be a really effective option, but like more generalistically, if you're just like someone who dabbles in Tarek, then you want to play him a bit more sparingly, play him into like compositions which want to play into you, so you can get more value out of your ultimate, more value out of your E. You can hit the targets more often. That is kind of like where the champion really shines. Poppy, yeah, also like really counterpick dependent into those high mobility team comps. That's where Poppy support really shines. Poppy jungle is getting to the point where it can be played into most things and work, which is where I recommend playing Poppy if you enjoy Poppy. But if you just want to play support, then yeah, use her sparingly as a counterpick. I think she can be still quite good in that regard. Nautilus, Leona, I like your more traditional support options. I have Nautilus over Leona because Leona's just an easier champ. Leona's not as good as Nautilus IMO at the moment, but Leona's very easy to play, which is why I put her towards the higher end of the A tier. Nautilus, I think, is an incredibly good champion because of the setup with the hook, the point and click CC on his ultimate. It's really nice at the moment just for getting a team fight going and just like being able to kind of retroactively do things is really, really nice. So I do recommend Nautilus. like over Leona. The other picks here are like Alistar, who's actually probably the number 1 A tier option compared to these two. I have Rel slightly higher than him, but I'll talk about Rel in a moment. But Alistar is getting nerfed as well next patch. That is just something to note. It's Alistar, Rel, and Braum. Those are the 3 supports being nerfed. They're all getting slight tag downs in the. Actually, no. 2 of them are getting tag downs in their armor. That's Alistar and Braum. Rel is having a slight tap down on her shield. So that is going to definitely shake up some of the things towards the high end of the engaged support meta. Bard is my other champion in the A tier. The only reason he isn't an S tier pick is because he is challenging to play. Bard is a very hard champion, and if you mess up, it'll be noticeable when you mess up. If you play this champion well, you play the roams well, you play his ultimate correctly, you like to delay Rift Herald charges to set up plays, you like your damage is really high on this champion. He is probably the best support pick in the game at the moment, so that is just something to note when playing this champion. I've missed Nico. Nico sits in the B tier at the moment. This champion had some bug fixes this patch, and is noticeably a weaker option, so I probably sits more like a mid-B tier option. I already didn't recommend Nico for mid to low elo because she's a hard champion to play as well. Like, there are some pretty hard support options which, if you play them well, can pretty aggressively jump up a tier list. But right now, yeah, Nico not doing quite as well in her current state. And then the S tier. So Nami still here, still really good for just picking up and playing. If you want to put Mastery into a champion, don't put Mastery into Nami. She's just not as rewarding as other picks. But if you're just looking for a good enchanter and a good champion to kind of like amp up your team, I think Nami is a good option there for you. A very good option, in fact, there for you. Janna, a bit more counter pick dependent, and if you play her in the right spot, she is one of the best support options in the game, which is why I do rate her as an S tier pick at the moment. The steroid with the shield combined with the like peeling tools of her Nado, of her ultimate, just gives this pick so much value. Combined with the harass on the W, I do really like this pick in its current state. Sona. Sona, this champion, if you play it like, if you're just like a one trick and you play it badly, it really is noticeable. But if you pilot this pick well, she's one of the best supports in the game. There is so much value in this champion. Her laning phase can be oppressive if you play it correctly, and you don't just like walk up and get like hooked, or you aren't just like trading HP for the love of the game. This pick is a very good option at the moment, so I really do recommend playing her, maybe not so, sparingly, for one, and in the if you really like refine your place on this champion, I really like her as a pick at the moment. But you can't just play her in every spot because she will be punished. You will struggle into compositions which will just blow you up, and that is where this champion really does struggle as an option. Lulu still here, still exists, even with like 4 nerfs in a row or something. This champion, I is still like one of the premier sort of support options. Pairs really nice with the hyper carries, and the buff towards like your Bork users and your Kraken users benefits her. So if you are playing her alongside those, she's doing a bit better this patch. It's quite nice for her. Still, just a very good S tier option. I have her slightly higher than the others because I think she can be used a bit more generally than some of the other picks. And then Braum and Rel, I have Braum slightly lower. Braum I have towards the lower end of the S tier. He's still a really good counter pick, but is slightly weaker this patch. For 5 armor nerf will be meaningful. You will die more consistently with this champion because he's just not going to be as tanky from all the way at level 1. But use him as a counter pick, and he's still one of the best champions in the game. In Rel's case, she is my number 1 recommended go-to. I think if you can, if you just ban Poppy or you ban Alistar, then almost every game you are going to get value out of Rel. That being said, though, there are games where you'll get more value out of other champions. Like Rel isn't the cut and dry best pick in the game because I don't think she's like an S plus option, but she is the premier pick in the S tier. I think she is the champion you should go to the most in the current meta. Those are my thoughts. A lot of the S tier, really benefit from being used as like counter picks, and like having the variety of the pool is better than just focusing on one champion at the moment. But if you are going to focus on one champion, I think Rel is really good. I think Leona is a really good easy option to go to. So if you are just like maybe an auto food support and you're looking for an engage option, I think Leona can be a really good support in that aspect. Ali, Nautilus, great engage options, and then Bard for mastery, I think is just the best option in the game. So those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.